Dollar Tree Jenga blocks are some of my favorite items to craft with, and today I've got a few new ideas to share with you. This project is pretty easy. I'm taking 3 square-shaped mirrors. I'm not sure where I got these ones from, but Dollar Tree does sell mirrors like this, or you can usually find them in a multi-pack inexpensively at IKEA or Walmart. But I'm placing them face down for now, so it's easier for you to see what I'm doing without that reflection. I'm creating a border with the Jenga blocks, and I wanted to make sure I could go all the way around the entire mirror surface without having to cut any of the blocks. That worked out for the outside, but then I wanted to add a row to cover where the mirrors meet, and I did have to cut down 2 blocks, 1 for each row. I tried using my miter shears to cut the block down, but since I have 0 hand strength, that wasn't working. I actually got the block stuck on the blade somehow, and I couldn't get it off or cut through it. So plan B, I got out the mini table saw. I love this saw, but man, I think I really need to play around with it some more. That small piece of the block just kept shooting right off and flying across the room. It was pretty forceful and kind of scary. Now we can start gluing everything together. I'm using this wood glue super glue that you can find at Dollar Tree. I love this glue. It starts to set up pretty quickly so you can keep on working, but also gives a much stronger bond than hot glue would. Next, I can add the mirror down on top of the blocks, and for this, I'm using E6000 to get a stronger hold. Before I add on those cross sections of the block, I wanted to add a little design to the mirrors. So I got out my rub-on transfers from IOD. This one is the Painterly Florals, and I'm going to use the pink roses. I cut out a couple of options and laid them out around the mirror. I love how easy it is to layer the IOD transfers. I've tried doing something similar with the Dixie Belle rub-on transfers, and they do not layer nearly as nicely. I had meant for the mirror to hang vertically, but I forgot about that when I was adding on the transfers, and I laid them out horizontally. It still looks super cute, but I wish I had remembered that part. It's really easy to add these rub-on transfers to the glass. You just peel off that backing and place it down wherever you want. All transfer books come with a burnishing stick, and you use this to rub over the transfer to apply them. You can see how beautifully the rose layered on top of the leaves on this section. The transfer looks like it came this way, like it is one cohesive piece. When I try to do this with the Dixie Belle transfers, you could see that leaf underneath of the flower, and it kind of changed the color of the flower where the leaf was under it. Once I had all the transfers on, I added the rest of the Jenga blocks to hide where those mirrors meet. And the last thing I did for this project was paint the frame. I was going back and forth debating if I wanted to paint it or leave it in the wood. I think the wood gave it a more contemporary look, while painting it gave it more of a shabby chic or cottagecore type of look. You could choose any color or stain you want for this part. I was pretty careful when adding the paint near the transfers, but for the rest of the frame, if I got it a little bit of the paint on the mirror, that's okay. It'll wipe right off with some water since the paint is water soluble. For this project, I'm starting out gluing 6 blocks together end to end, and I'm making 6 sets like this. Next, I'm taking these 2 wood circles from my stash. The larger one I know is from Dollar Tree, and I'm not sure where I got the smaller one from. So I'm making a plant stand, and I really wasn't sure how this was going to work out. I'm using the smaller circle for the bottom and needed the Jenga block sticks to go out at an angle. Hot glue was my best option here to attach them, so I could fill in that space where the block doesn't sit on the circle. I just realized I'm wearing my grumpy shirt. So a little backstory, my son Mason tells me that I'm always grumpy. Like several times a day he tells me this, even when I'm not. So when we were in Disney over spring break, I had to get a grumpy shirt. We couldn't find one in Disney, so this one's actually from Amazon, but I thought it was pretty funny because we used to call my dad Grumpy when I was a kid, so I guess it's my turn now. Anyways, back to the project, I drew a line through the center of the circle so I knew where to place the first two pieces. Then I measured the distance between the two so I could space out the rest of the blocks evenly. Then I added the rest of the blocks to the smaller circle first, and then flipped it over and glued them down on the top circle. When I did the big circle, I glued down one piece, then did the opposite side. That way it was staying stable and level, and I wasn't pulling the circle more to one side. Once all the sticks were glued on, I added some more hot glue to fill in any gaps and make sure they were all supported. Next, I wanted to add some more Jenga blocks around the top as the sides. But one thing to note here, I was making sure the whole block was glued onto the circle, which left a little bit of the circle sticking out. I wish I would have pulled the blocks out just a little bit so you didn't see any of that circle on top. I think it would have looked a little bit cleaner that way, but not a big deal. When I got to the end of the circle, I did have to cut down one of the blocks to fit, and this time I used my miter box. I added 2 more rows so that it was 3 blocks high, and I staggered them. So this next block is going across 2 underneath of it. I also added 1 row to the bottom circle as well. Next, I stained the whole thing in English chestnut, and that's it for this little guy. I love it. I haven't seen anything like this before, but I do wonder how strong it will be and how long it will hold up. I don't think it's super sturdy. Just throwing that out there in case you decide to give this one a try. I think this next one is my favorite project from today. I've had this idea for over a year and just haven't done it yet. I got these chopping mats from the Dollar Tree and they are see-through. One side's kind of frosted looking and the other is shiny. I want to decoupage the mat and I grabbed 2 options from my stash. One's a decoupage paper and the other is a basic tissue paper that was a little bit more colorful. Both options are stunning and very spring feeling, but I thought you could see the print and pattern a little bit better on the blue florals, so I went with that one. Since the decoupage paper wasn't as tall as the chopping mat, I had to cut it down a little bit. I used my X-Acto knife to cut it down, and it was really easy to cut through. Guess that wouldn't really make it a good chopping mat though. I then cut the mat in half because I'm making a little light box or a lantern and it needs 4 sides. Next, I wiped down the surface of the mat. Since we're decoupaging the paper to the back, or the shiny side, I wanted to make sure there was no fingerprints or dust that got trapped and you would see them from the other side. I'm going to use my liquid patina to glue the paper onto the mat, but I actually think Mod Podge or decoupage glue would have been a little bit better for this project specifically. Decoupage paper is pretty thick, much thicker than when you use a napkin, and the liquid patina dries quickly. I used a fan brush to apply the glue so it would get up under the paper easily and apply the glue to all of the areas. I wasn't thinking when I did this first one, I had wanted to add both mats to the paper before cutting the paper down, but I had only added the one mat at first, so I had to cut this one down, but for the second paper, I added both mats and glued them at the same time. As the glue was drying, I realized I could see some streaks under the paper. It was like the areas that had more glue turned the paper more transparent, and the thinner glue areas stayed whiter. So I went back over top of the whole thing with a layer of the patina. I sanded off all the excess paper, and here's why I would have used a thicker glue like Mod Podge. You can see the paper peeling away from all the corners. I had to add more patina to make sure it stays down. Next, we need to build the lantern structure. I was able to create a rectangle with the Jenga blocks without having to cut down any of them again. Winning! made 4 rectangles, and then before I added the decoupage mats, I want to paint them. I wanted the lantern to have a ton of texture, so I added baking soda to my paint. And I added a lot of baking soda. The way I like to get the most texture by using this method is by painting the first coat on how you normally would paint something. And then when you add the second coat, or however many coats you want after, you stipple it on. I love this technique. It is kind of hard to tell on camera here, but I'll make sure to get a close-up in the reveal. Once the paint was all dry, I'm adding decoupage mats onto the blocks with hot glue. The one thing you want to be cognizant of here is that you are gluing the frosted side down, so that's what you see on the outside of the lantern. That way you don't have the paper texture facing out. Next, I assembled the lantern and glued all 4 sides together. I realized after I put everything together, I needed a base for inside of the lantern, because I'm gonna add some feet and I need something to put the light on. So I glued some blocks together. They don't fit perfectly on the bottom, but that's okay, you're not gonna see this part. I just painted them white as well, but not with the texture paint. It was a little difficult to get the blocks glued in. I had dry fitted it and it was pretty snug, so of course when I went to actually glue it in, one side didn't want to cooperate. But I left it as is. Like I said, you aren't going to see this part. And last, I grabbed these little feet that I have. I think these are from Hobby Lobby, and I glued them onto the base. I like how they looked being in a little bit from the edge. I just love how this project turned out. I think it is so stunning, and even more so than I had envisioned.